goosebumps every time, yeah, 713. The 281, yeah, I'm riding. Why they on me? Why they on me? I'm flying, sipping low key. I'm sipping low key and honest, rider. I get those goosebumps every time. I get those goosebumps every time. I need the high, throw that to the side. I get those goosebumps every time, yeah. When you're not around, we can throw that to the side. I get those goosebumps every time.
Off the mugs.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Welcome to Loaded Bag NUFC. The emergency meeting is in place. That is for sure. And weren't expecting to be on tonight, but some breaking news has brought us to the table. And not only are us loaded boys here, we've got the big guns in to discuss this as well. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome back Keith Patterson and of course the Rice of Football's own Kieran Maguire. Welcome to you both. How are you both?
I'm still recovering from being dreadful for 45 minutes and then still beating Spurs.
That is true.
It's a result that counts, isn't it?
Absolutely, Keith.
And for me, I was doing great at about mid-afternoon when I thought I was going to have an easy night, and then some news broke, and then 600 texts and emails later, it's gone crazy. But
absolutely crazy. Look, let's get into it, and of course we always do a little bit of a storyboard, so we'll go through it, and then look, Kieran, Keith, we want to get your thoughts on this, and you know, the result in itself, and then of course how it will potentially affect Newcastle United moving forward. But we had the statement from Man City, and they put their statement out and made it absolutely clear of how they stood. The Premier League put a statement out, two varying statements, I have to say. But interesting point in there that the rules were found to be discriminatory in how they operate because they deliberately excluded the shareholders' loans. And we're going to come back to that point a little bit later on. But ultimately, the Mail Online have reported that obviously it was something that they wanted to be wide-ranging sponsorship deals City had lined up with the Etihad late last year, and their previous 10-year deal. That was the issue that they ultimately had with it. Amongst that, there were some other issues with regards to certain Newcastle's name being mentioned, and City had said the changes were down to fear-mongering after the Saudi takeover of Newcastle United. Just to add to that, 8 teams who provided evidence against Man City. Okay. Interestingly, Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool. I don't think anyone will be surprised by that. But the likes of Wolves, West Ham, Bournemouth, Brentford, and Fulham in the mix there as well. Now, I want to get back to kind of the details around this because, you know, they touch on some really important points here. And they've kind of been highlighted. They've been well documented on social media as well. But I think it's important for people that aren't on social media that they hear this. They said that there's, however, it's been agreed that there's no evidence of any formal initiative before the autumn of 2021 to amend PSR in the manner in which they were amended in December 2021. And I think that's quite interesting, particularly from a Newcastle United point of view, because that's the argument that we've had and talked about a lot with yourself, Kieran, but also Keith. We've had those conversations way back when with you regarding that situation too. Other interesting points here. The fact that our takeover was on the 7th, and there was an interesting email sent by someone of a Premier League club on behalf of 10 other Premier League clubs. And that email requested something very particular. If anyone's seen my socials, I tweeted that out today. I'll read the brief part. The rules should have the widest possible definitions of related parties perhaps using the takeover code definitions when applied to companies like those in the Gulf region. I thought that was really, really interesting and quite telling in those particular emails. A club that showed support of Man City and provided evidence as witnesses: Chelsea Football Club, Newcastle United, of course, and Everton. We might have to make amends, Chris, with Everton Football Club after that one. But let's wait and see. But ultimately, the breakdown: the rules deemed unlawful because they did not take into consideration interest-free loans. Likely change in the regulations that could lead to City striking more lucrative deals, not just City. I might add, clubs with high levels of borrowing now in danger of breaching profit and sustainability rules. Arsenal City title rivals have borrowings of more than 200 million. And the Premier League stance was backed by Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool, and so forth, as we've already mentioned. So some interesting news coming out there from today, guys. And look, Kieran, we'll come to you first on your opinion on this and where it stands from your perspective. I know you've been a busy man today once this news broke. Just what do you make of all of this news coming out today that City have won?
I think City will be having 2 cheers rather than 3, in the sense that they will be delighted that the rules, which, whilst there's no evidence to prove that it was a direct result of what had happened with the PIF acquisition of Newcastle, the fact that there'd been vague discussions about changing them, and then all of a sudden something was rushed through, does it? I think the court of common sense will say there's proof that there's significant evidence. So City will be pleased. They will feel vindicated with regards to the commission saying that the rules are not in accordance with law. I think what City have done really well, and I think this will be the most difficult thing for the Premier League to overturn, is that I support Brighton. People know I support Brighton. Our owners lent Brighton £373 million interest free. That's great. That's absolutely wonderful. But as it's interest free, isn't that giving Brighton a financial advantage over somebody that has to borrow from the bank? In exactly the same way that you could say that if a club gets a sponsorship agreement from somebody connected directly or indirectly to the owner who's prepared to pay big bucks, are they getting an advantage? Yes, they are. But you can't have it both ways. You can't say that interest-free loans are okay, but sponsorship deals aren't. And if you take a look at that list of clubs who have owners with interest-free loans, they're not going to vote for a change in the rules. So I think the Premier League is very much on the hook on the back of this. And therefore, potentially, I think this is extremely good news for Newcastle United, in the sense that the opposition from Premier League to sponsorship deals, and you're right, absolutely right, Daz, to highlight the Manchester City one. The commission said the Premier League should have sorted out an answer 3 months quicker than it did. So why is the Premier League deliberately dragging its heels? That's not in the best interests of the Premier League. That's not in the best interests of Manchester City. That's not in the best interests of anybody. If you're deliberately making things awkward. So for those clubs that, I say we've got the existing big six, and then we've got 2 or 3 clubs who I classify as aspirational and ambitious: Newcastle United, Aston Villa, potentially Everton if they get a new owners in, potentially West Ham if they get new owners in. The existing owner, I don't think he's that interested. Who wants to be able to accelerate the investment in the club, and they can do that through sponsorship and other means. So that is potential good news. At the same time, you've got to comply with UEFA rules. At the same time, nobody's, I think, suggesting that you get somebody to sponsor the 4 corner flags for £100 million. He happens to be the mate of the owner. There's got to be a happy balance for everybody.
Definitely. Keith, we'll come to you because I know, look, you've been really vocal on this from way back in June when the arbitration first came about. You've been very vocal on this situation with City and the implications it could have for Newcastle United and City as well. What have you made of the news coming out today, and like where do you sit with it all in terms of how it can affect the Premier League, but of course Newcastle United moving forward?
I think from a year and a half before the takeover, when the takeover at Newcastle got turned down around about the April, there was illegal and anti-competitive behaviour taking place. And when we went to the club and spoke to the club, we asked them, did they know why the takeover hadn't gone through? The club with their lawyers said they didn't know why it hadn't gone through. It's remarkable because we gave them some evidence and gave them some proof of why it hadn't gone through. And it was because people were lobbying against the takeover of Newcastle. And when you've got a competition, especially when there's money involved, and you've got competitors, it's not only illegal to write things down or to act in an unsavoury manner, it's also illegal to even think about doing it. So it doesn't have to be in writing. It could be actions or thoughts. And that's well known in competition law. But what we're doing is we give categorical evidence, we give it to a KC, and fans in Newcastle built up a case that cost considerable monies. If one person dropped out and spent 5 figures, so it gives you an idea of the kind of sums that some of the fans put in. And it was a small bunch. It was only really 3 people at the end that made contributions. But the overall fund was that they built a case big enough to challenge the Premier League. Had that case not been challenged, the arbitration would have turned down the takeover of Newcastle. So that's been accepted by lawyers. And the key point was that the fans, who I was one of them, built up a case of 6 points to run against the Premier League. One of those points was that we had written proof that an organisation had lobbied the Premier League and had lobbied several clubs and encouraged them to lobby back at the Premier League to stop the takeover of Newcastle United. When at the time it was Queen's Counsel, because the Queen was alive, it was called a QC, which is, as we know, as a barrister. QCs at the time said that it was illegal what they'd done, and it was classed as collective lobbying. We ran 6 points against the Premier League, and you know, some trolls and fans of the cartel boys were saying we wouldn't get a reply. We got a 14-page letter, which ultimately helped Newcastle make their case public, because it's well documented that Dick DeMarco's gone online and said in public over the last month that the problem with the Premier League is everything's done secretively and it's done in private. And really, what he's lobbying for is that fans should know what's going on. People should know. Football clubs should know what is going on. There shouldn't be all this secrecy. And Kieran's just eloquently explained that you shouldn't drag your heels. You know, it's in public interest, but it's in fans' interest, it's in the club's interest that you make decisions and make them promptly and quickly. But today, we've seen a repeat of what they were doing back in April of 2020. 2020 was April. They were collectively lobbying. So the letter that's come out today, which has been put in as evidence in the court, it becomes evidence, and it's categorical, and you can't get rid of that. You can't hide it. The letter comes out and says that a person, which people are presuming is a CEO, but remember that both sides will know who that is. It's unthinkable that they don't. And one of the clubs comes together and he writes a letter and quotes 10 companies with him. Well, straight away, that's anti-competitive. You can't have a competition where 11 clubs or 2 even come together and decide to do anything against one member. It's just totally, and it trumps all your Premier League laws. It trumps your arbitration. These are EU laws, UK laws, and you've got to abide by them. The problem is that clubs in Britain can't take an action against the Premier League, because when they join the Premier League, they signed to say they won't take the Premier League through an open court. They agree as part and parcel of joining that they will only take the Premier League through an arbitration. Back in the day, Mike actually had a company called St. James Holdings, and that company hadn't adhered to the Premier League rules, so there's a loophole. So we used that vehicle to take an action, and our action was duplicated. Our exact court case was put out, and in the words of KC Rob O'Donoghue, he said that 95% of your case, Keith, has been duplicated and run by the club. The club ran it, and that was the stick, as quoted by Nick DeMarco at the time, that would probably crack the Premier League, because it was always felt that arbitration, you get the 2-1 vote against them. But the key, we ran 6 points, and the Premier League tried in the letter, the 14-page letter, to answer 2 of them. And the answer, the KC said to us, was 3 out of 10. He said, based on the answers, I think you'll win those 2 points. The strongest 4 points, they never answered. So we thought we were good for 4 and probably win the other 2. One of those points was collective lobbying. It was where an organisation, which will remain nameless, but it will be brought up again if it ever goes to a competition court, lobbied several people, several clubs, to lobby the Premier League to stop the takeover of Newcastle. Roll the dice forward 3 years, and now you've got Newcastle United sitting back, not being invited to the meeting. That is crucial. To my knowledge, I'm told by people I trust that Newcastle weren't invited to this meeting quoted in that letter. That was a meeting supposedly between 19 clubs. And the rumour is 18 voted and 1 abstained. Whatever happened, one director that asked for that, and even said he could get it quicker if possible in the letter, asked and got the backing of 10 plus clubs. So you've got 11 clubs voting and quoting one. One doesn't get invited, and they collectively lobby the Premier League to push these rules through quickly to stop, and I think it's quoted, Middle Eastern investment. In a court of law, I think it's smashed. I think if this ever reaches a competition court, but the difference today is, and you've got to respect this, is the Premier League have had a rap on the knuckles. All they've been told is go rewrite the rules. In effect, I think the people that Kieran's mentioned, with the shares, I think that's more damning. And I think Kieran's right that that's more good news to Newcastle instantly, because you can have people like Arsenal say rumours are true, £200 million worth of loans that they're going to have to address. Now, if that's put on the PSR, there's going to be several clubs in trouble. And you've seen already where some people have questioned how Manchester United have managed to meet the last PSR. But we all know Newcastle did it. Newcastle were sitting there like in the crosshairs with 2 people, which quite honestly, the kid, for me, Elliot Anderson, I would never have sold. Yeah. I didn't know enough about Minter, but if you look at Minter, look what he did. He got the goal that turned the point against Spurs, and to me, looks like he's going to be a cracking player. But in the ideal world, Newcastle were never going to sell those players. We knew which players Newcastle were trying to sell, and they weren't sold. But if, for example, other clubs were looking at 50 to 200 million pounds worth of debt or PSR negative with interest-free loans, which are now being agreed by a panel, should be included, but sponsorships were stopped. So they stopped the sponsorships because that suited them. They allowed the interest-free shareholder loans to go through, and ultimately they made Newcastle sell 2 players at the prime of the football careers, which if you look at that, you look at the window, you look at adding those 2 players back in, our squad was completely different. We haven't strengthened, we had a horrendous window, but this is all being done deliberately. It's all being done, as Kieran pointed out, where they drag their heels when it suits, and when they push these things through. They pushed this letter through in 5 days. From 5 days, that guy, the takeover being come through, that guy was writing, and in the 5 days, not only was he writing on behalf of 11 clubs. I mean, he's been busy just to be able to do that. He's been working his arse off just to get that letter and get the backing. You can't put a letter out and say, oh, well, I've got 10 clubs to back us, without having a lot of WhatsApps, a lot of emails, a lot of introduction. Take this through a court. The court doesn't, a competition court doesn't say, all right, you can rewrite your rules. a competition court, the first thing they'll do is you only got to win at 1 point. And already a competition court, the evidence goes back 7 years. So already you're going to have the collective lobbying they did to stop the takeover of Newcastle in a competition action. You're going to have the collective lobbying they've just done with clubs to stop associated party transactions. And you could have everything else in between. So you'll get the disclosure of all the conversations where that director approached, he obviously didn't approach his own club, he didn't approach Newcastle. So you would surmise he's approached 17 clubs, 17 or 18 clubs. When he does that, there's back and forward. Why should we do it? What's the benefit? And he'll be selling his point. That will be on a WhatsApp, or it'll be on a text, or it'll be on an email, or it'll be on a phone. We'll have to declare all of that. And all the people that were approached would have to give evidence to say why they're approaching that way. So for me, clubs can't take an action. Clubs cannot take an action because they've signed up to say they won't. They'll only go to arbitration. There isn't the penalties in arbitration. There isn't the risk or the fear. But if this goes into the main court, I've seen enough evidence over the last 4 years to see you wipe the league with all those who's partaken in this anti-competitive behaviour, but also you wipe the league with the Premier League. The Premier League will change in its substance if you do it. How it happens, it could be a company that's associated. The only thing you've got to do is demonstrate a loss and then show funds to be able to run a case. Fans could take that action. Spoke to KCs over the last 2 months, and they've said that fans would have grounds to take actions. So if fans got together, they could do a public action and take this on and take this into a full-blown cat case at minimum and full competition case at best. But for me, the thing that came out was maybe it's not as dramatic. You know, everybody's saying, does that mean we're going to get a rampant gold state, James? I don't think it's going to be that quick. I don't think things are going to move that fast. But I think the Premier League will try and rewrite things. But the cat's out the bag now on the shares and on the evidence. And, you know, Newcastle United know that there's something called Newcastle rules, and they know they've been quoted in meetings which they weren't invited to, which is highly anti-competitive. You can't have a competition of 20 people and have a meeting of some of the competitors where one of them's not invited. You just physically can't do it.
Kieran, I'm going to come to Kieran on this because look, I think we're all with you with regards to that, Keith, for sure. But Kieran, from what Keith's mentioned, on top of how you kind of laid it out to us, you know, how do you see it sort of playing out now? Because you've talked about the sort of owner sponsorships, and this is just to paint a little picture here in terms of owner-related loans that have been made within the club. Some at sort of like 0% as well. We know that the Premier League have called a meeting, an emergency meeting, a little bit like our emergency meeting tonight, to discuss everything APT. Where do you see this moving forward now? In terms of the Premier League are saying little tweaks need to be made. There are others. The Times have mentioned it could be something a little bit more significant. How do you see it playing out from this point, just on the little nuggets that we've been given today, mate?
I think, first of all, how Keith just summarised it has been absolutely brilliant. But what I'd also say that I think the Premier League's in a really awkward position because it's now got a set of rules which 4 or 5 years ago allowed Everton, within the rules at the time, to sell an option on a stadium which didn't have planning permission for £35 million. And that was okay. Then we had the Newcastle takeover and everything changed so quickly. So going forwards, the way that the Premier League will try to sell it is we've taken notice of those parts of the commission which we were not successful on, and we will make adjustments. But part of the problem the Premier League's got is that the rules it brought in December 2021, which it had not stress tested, which it had not sought to see whether the rules were likely to satisfy competition law. If they go and bring in a new set of rules at this meeting next week, it will have exactly the same issue. If you make a decision quickly, we've all been at a nightclub and we've made that decision, and then you regret it for the rest of the weekend. And that's where the Premier League are at present. So my concern is that they were made to look very, very foolish by Nick DeMarco at the Leicester hearing, which effectively proved that Leicester City, despite playing 38 games between August and May, August 22 and May 23, weren't a member of the Premier League at the end of the season. And I love Nick to bits, and he and I, we have regular chats, and we often present on panels. And he's coming on my podcast. I'm just going to plug that in about 3 or 4 weeks. So if anybody got any questions for Nick, you're more than welcome to fire them to me. So my concern is that unless the Premier League goes through the right process to change the rules, then it will just end up tying itself in knots, and the next club that feels it's been disadvantaged, which could be Newcastle, it could be Manchester City, it could be Aston Villa. Aston Villa have been very critical of the rules. Yeah. John Textor, who thought he was going to be the owner of Everton, but is now in an awkward position. The equivalent of saying he fancies his wife's sister and ends up having to stay with the wife and having to live with that. He says the rules are rubbish as well. So there's the Premier League's in a really awkward position. Chelsea are apparently fine if they sell their training, their car parks to themselves, if they sell the women's team to themselves. If that's not acting in utmost good faith towards other clubs, is it? We did have this situation, and I appreciate that Newcastle were forced into it, as were Villa, as were Forest, as were Leicester, as were Everton, as were Chelsea, in terms of making player swaps. And that's not in the best interest of football. And it's not in the best interest of the footballers concerned, because you've ended up with a goalkeeper that you didn't need. And, God bless the lad. It's not, he's been treated like a piece of meat in all of this.
Yeah.
And that's not fair on him. That's not fair on Newcastle United in terms of your fan base, because that's not where you needed to strengthen the squad. It is a ludicrous situation. The Premier League are trying to make out as if it's a minor issue, but it's much bigger than that.
So, from our perspective, from Newcastle United's perspective, Keith, you touched on it quite nicely. You said you're not expecting big sponsorships to come in, but is there a window, or is there an opportunity where we can act fast on this to kind of benefit us in this, whilst all of this turmoil is going on? I'm trying to sort of process it all, because there's been so much information thrown at us today. It's really hard to get your head around it all. But ultimately, from us as Newcastle United fans, we're thinking, how can we benefit from this? It seems like we will be able to benefit from it, but how? Is there an opportunity? Is there a little tiny window, Kieran, where we can actually get in there and maybe do something that's going to really kind of benefit us moving forward? Because we have been held back. Keith, like you said, Keith executed his words like perfectly in terms of how we've been held back throughout this whole process, the 18 months before the takeover and since. Is there a way that we can kind of fight our way up there and be up there a little bit quicker than what it's seeing at the moment?
You've probably got three angles. The first angle is, if you were to put a sponsorship through tomorrow, if there was one weight in the wins and Silverstone had a sponsorship in Newcastle, you've got to imagine that there is a modicum of common sense in the Premier League, and they would possibly not wave it through, but it would be seen more positively than pre the result today. So if there was a sponsorship went through, let's suppose there was something that could go through. Let's suppose it was ground naming rights, and let's suppose it was a Ramco at St James's, and Newcastle threw it in at 50 million. I think you'd get a discussion rather than a dismissal. I think that's the difference, because you'd be talking to a Premier League that battered and bruised. Not to forget that the subject to paying losses, so we're told on the case today. But if Newcastle went with a series of sponsorships, say on the training ground, the training kit, and other things, and they were typically around the 10 million mark, you think the Premier League would be pretty ballsy and pretty, I don't know, pretty silly. I think they're some of the silliest people around, but they've been sillier than normal if they were to discount them or dismiss them. I think this would maybe be a good time to put some sponsorships through. However, I think a bigger win than doing that today is the share price, the share part of the deal, because that's going to throw lots of things open. It's going to throw them 10 clubs. I mean, Kieran's list, put that chart on. I hadn't seen it until you just put it on screen because I've been working today, but it's great where you see everyone has done it. And the first thing I do is look to the right and see Newcastle's got 0 next to it. I think, thank God, that's the way it is. But if you look at some of the clubs in there, people who claim to understand it would say that Everton with that number, and you see Arsenal have got some, that's going to impact their PSR. But I would say that's a bigger instant win than where we are at the moment. I would say that's bigger in the sense that Newcastle will be able to evidence. Let's go back to that keeper that Kieran mentioned. We didn't want that keeper, but clearly we had to take the keeper as part of the deal. But the next question that begs me is, we had an outstanding kid, like a cracking middle and midfield player who's got Player of the Month in Notts Forest, Elliot Anderson. He was coming on to be exactly what we wanted, and we've always been short of a ball-winning midfielder, and we've had to play Bruno in that hole at times instead of putting him further up the field. And if he was developed in that way, it would have saved us buying a £40 million player. But what I worry about now is that we got Elliot Anderson for 35 less 20 million for the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper has not even become our number 2. Yeah. So we would never have given 20 million. But it sounds to me as though if we'd have given 5 for him, it sounds like we took 20 on Anderson, which is just, it's highway robbery, it's ludicrous, but it's the deliberation that the Premier League's made you do this. Now, that's all well and good, but now pour those figures in, because we talked about the difference between lawful and unlawful, because they're saying that some of the decisions made were unlawful. Well, why have all those amounts been sifted through the PSR? Why have they gone unnoticed? Why did they not say to Newcastle, look, just get a loan off the Saudis, interest-free, and put yourself on par with Arsenal? And that way, you could do. Did Newcastle know? I doubt it. Did we really genuinely know that by doing that we're going to comply better with PSR? But if you said what's the instant win today, I would say probably the bit that King's much more articulate in covering that area of what that will mean to clubs and how they'll get out of that and how people answer PSR. But I think the middle ground is, where did Newcastle go now? Newcastle, the second biggest win for Newcastle today is they've now got the second time in 4 years, remember Everton's last for 7, where they've got an absolute showcase winner of a competition action should it make a law court for collective lobbying. They've got it in writing, they've got it part of a public law case that's been judged on. It's undeniable evidence. Me granny could run that case and win it based on that. And I've got another example, which is probably more damning in the sense it included sponsors lobbying football teams to lobby the Premier League to stop the takeover. And that's in written evidence, as it's been test proved. And then on top of that, you've got these Newcastle rules. Now, if they were the Bournemouth rules or the Southampton rules, there'd be an outcry. But because it was Saudi owned, apparently the richest state fund in the world, it was sort of accepted as fair game having a proper Newcastle. But it doesn't make it right that there's something voted on 5 days after a takeover, and the people running around at director level, club level, CEO level to try and do it. So I think the evidence from this Manchester City case, and don't get us wrong, I don't think they ran it for our benefit. I think they ran it to make their 115 charges more winnable. I think that what they did was they were trying to get, and I expect to see the 115 number come down. We'll jump onto that for 2 seconds. How can you run a court case against a club of 150 breaches by an unlawful and unfair organisation? And then when you think about it, some of the evidence apparently was stolen. The rumour is that a lot of it was stolen evidence. So how you say, so you brought a case to me, you run an unlawful operation, you stole the evidence that you're going to present to us, you tell us they're acting badly. It sounds like 2-1 to them. So when you come back to Newcastle, I think the second big win after the shares is the evidence they got, categorical evidence that there is anti-competitive behaviour taking place in the Premier League by clubs with the agreement of the Premier League. Okay, research what a cartel is, where one or more partners does something to detriment of the other. Have a look at anti-competitive and you'll see all this come out in there. Third thing I think is the future. I think whilst everybody wants to see Newcastle open the wallet in January and be able to spend and be able to compete again, I don't think the Premier League and the red teams are going to lie down as quick as that. They're going to try every trick they can do in the book to try and curtail City's growth and Villa's entry. West Ham have to get taken over. Everton if they get to. I think they're going to try and close that down because I think the likes of Arsenal and Liverpool, for example, I won't mention Man United because they're 14th place, but I think those two's best chance of ever win this league is through a lockout. And I think they've realised that. But when you look at Newcastle, I think if you pull us out and you say to me, what are you thinking privately? I think privately that there is a legal route now in Great Britain to get this illegal behaviour into a full court, at the very least, the competition tribunal, CAT case, which would be granted, and the courts would give it as being in the interest of the public, which last time they did that, there was 33,000 people sat on a court case in 25% of the world's countries to watch the most viewed court start to a CAT case in history. And that was Newcastle United. Now, I think we could repeat that again. And I think, sadly, I'm going to say this, I think they'll probably be through fans. I think that fans undoubtedly can demonstrate loss and fans collectively could raise the monies. But when you know you're going to win something, I think it's a case of time before people have just had enough. And I spoke to a guy from Everton tonight, and he says, I know we have our differences. And he said, but, he said, how quick did they charge us in Forest? And we just all would rather see people have a go. So if you have a go, and he said, if it's you and Villa, fair play. But in the past, it's just that big six is what we've been brought up for 10 years, just big six, big six. That's why we were pleased when Fulham started having a go. We were pleased when Brighton got all those signings and started having a go, and then the league, the whole table started changing. When you look at the league table now, you see Man United 14th, you see Spurs slip back down, and Chelsea's wobbles. You think, good stuff. That is what competition's about. But I think in order, I'd say the interest loans are first, and the evidence is second, and third. I think the fact you can get the court eventually now, you just got to find the route. But I think the evidence is there. Whoever gets this into court wins.
Kieran, I think there's a few questions to come to. I know time's limited, and I know you might have to shoot in a second, but there's been some really good questions from people in the chat. We've got nearly 700 in the chat, like 120 odd likes. Come on, people, just to click that button very, very quickly. It means the world to us. And thank you for tuning in and being a part of the channel, and a fantastic show tonight. It's fascinating listening to yourself, Kieran, and Keith, of course, sharing your knowledge. It's an absolute pleasure to have you both on the panel tonight to talk all things APT. Kieran, some questions here for you.
So yeah, it's the first one. Question: if interest-free loans from owners are allowed, is there a reason our owners can't have done the same thing to help us with FFP, PSR?
The way that it helps the club is that it's the interest which goes into your PSR calculations. So what's happened at Newcastle United is, and this is partly to do with Islamic finance as well. If anybody's familiar with the way that Islamic finance works, that loans and interest is not part of the culture, it's not part of the financial arrangements, is that if an owner has to borrow money from a bank, say borrows £500 million and is paying 10%, that's £50 million in interest, which goes into your PSR calculations. If they borrow that from the owner, who charges them no interest, you get £50 million advantage. So if Newcastle's owners lent them money, it wouldn't give them a further advantage because they've already put the money in the form of shares. And a share is in many ways similar to an interest-free loan, except you never have to repay the shares. And in theory, you have to repay the loans. So it won't give Newcastle an advantage, but it has given clubs like Brighton and Arsenal and Everton and so on, it has given them a financial advantage in making sure that they complied with PSR in historic years.
You said earlier as well, Kieran, then you said 2 hoorays, not 3. And I read the great article from Mark Douglas as well. I know he had spoken to you as well. But there's a question here linked to that in a way. Well, actually, a few. Simon Knight says, Miguel Delaney seems to suggest that the Premier League will strengthen the PSR rules. Is he talking rubbish again? And Kev Tay says, if EPL change and tighten the rules and gets voted through, means nothing changes. Yes or no? Any thoughts there?
I think the challenge to the Premier League is that to change the rules, you need 14 votes. We have proven today with the hearing that you cannot tighten the PSR rules in relation to sponsorship arrangements unless you tighten at the same time the rules in relation to the loans. So that's why the loans, Keith said it, I've said the loans is the biggie.
Yeah.
And given that you showed that chart, well, Arsenal aren't going to vote for it, Liverpool aren't going to vote for it, Brighton aren't going to vote for it. You look at that list of clubs. We've got 7 or 8 who've borrowed more than £100 million from the owners. I mean, they can convert the loans into shares, but that means they never get their money back. Brighton have Tony Bloom was owed £450 million 2 years ago, but since Brighton got a new benefactor called Todd Bowley, they've managed to pay Tony Bloom back out of him selling weasels to Chelsea. So you see from the lender's point of view that at some point they might want to get not necessarily all of that money back, but some of it. Well, you won't be able to do that if they have to write off the loans and convert them into shares. So that's the problem I see. How is the Premier League going to tighten the rules unless it also tightens the rules on the loans?
A good comment here from Lisa asking. Sorry, Keith, do you want to jump in first?
No, yeah, I was just going to say to you that Kieran's hit the point there. And why will they automatically turn, let's say, kosher and start doing fair rules? Where does fair and competitive come in the dialogue of the Premier League? I mean, I've been preaching this for 4.5 years, that this thing is one anti-competitive cartel. That's all it is. And I've spent a lot of my working life fighting world cartels. The court case that we were going to run against the Premier League was a cat case. It's the smallest you can get. And that would have cost less than £500,000. I had a court case in my work career, which is 55 million in legals, and it never went to court. So it gives you the idea that the multiple size it was. When you're talking about this, though, you're talking about the Premier League all of a sudden rewriting rules. Just remember, if this had gone through a competition case, they wouldn't be saying go and rewrite your rules. There wouldn't be a panel saying, look, you haven't done much wrong. Just make your rules work. They would have been thrown the book at them. Your heads would have rolled and the whole thing would have crashed. So don't forget that evidence is still there. That's not going anywhere, that evidence. all the stuff that we got, 90 gigabyte, and what's there now from this case, there'll be similar amounts of evidence, new evidence that's come up, and there'll be evidence that we haven't got that we wouldn't get until we went to court and took them for disclosure, where you've got to tell basically last time you farted, which direction it flew in. You'll get everything on disclosure. You'll get who was on the WhatsApp, what they did, what they said, why you said that, and they'll question and double question. When it gets to that stage, what happens is people see what's coming, and then they drop out. They fall. That's why things don't make court, because there's evidence, and your KC looks at it and says, you ain't going to win this. And that's where this is now. It was there during the takeover. That evidence exists, and it's been placed in 4 legal offices for my safety. And then there's more evidence just come up now. So there's as much evidence as you could. It basically needs this to go to a proper court rather than arbitration. So when people criticise Newcastle United, which is it's a common criticism, Newcastle soft and shy, why are we not doing stuff? It's time Newcastle got some balls and did what. No, it isn't. Man City did this to help their 115 cases, and at the same time, they are our allies. They are, and they didn't go against us hard in the takeover out the big 6. They were the one party that was reluctant. They were the one party that were more supportive of Newcastle, and that's why I'm supportive of them. That's why I want them to wipe the floor with these people. I want them to expose a cartel, but the only way they're catching Man City isn't on a football pitch. It's in a court, and God forbid I just hope Man City with it. But just remember why they ran it, and so when you're critical in Newcastle, say why Newcastle not running a case, because Newcastle hadn't even got the evidence. Newcastle weren't in that meeting. Newcastle didn't get that letter. So Newcastle wisely sat back and watched Man City gather the evidence, and that's what I'm saying to you. That's why after these loans, which Kieran's been brilliant on, I think you now go to the evidence that Newcastle's gathered, and they've been given some real freebies.
Keith. Oh, sorry, Pete. Sorry.
Go for it.
I was just going to ask. I
just didn't want to. Before you ask us that question,
yeah, go on, mate.
Dazzy said something about Lisa, and I just felt as though I jumped in. He said you.
Oh no, you're. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll go to the comment from Lisa.
I felt rude there. Sorry.
She'd be mad with me otherwise. She says, why is it taking a week to hold a meeting the Premier League? And it only took them 5 days to gather all the votes against Newcastle, the golf clubs. Like that one, Lisa. Sorry, Chris, you go next. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I was just going to ask Keith. Obviously, we know, or we've heard that the Premier League are going to be calling an emergency meeting probably this week. In terms, and I know this is only going to be very much guesswork, Keith, because I know you probably won't know the exact time period, but how long do you think, it's acknowledged that the Premier League are going to have to rewrite the rules? They're going to have to change the wording in the Premier League rule book, or do whatever they need to do in order to try and satisfy, this case that's now come about. How long do you think it will take them to do that, or what would you expect the time period to be? Like, do you think they'll drag their heels like they've done with this case, or do you think they're going to try and actively move it as quickly as possible?
The first thing you've got to ask yourself is why didn't they an extraordinary meeting? Because when you look at their press release tonight, they won everything. They never lost anything caught in the press release. Press release won this. They won nothing, and then 2 minutes later, come with an extraordinary general meeting. So. If you don't think there's horseshit out there, get your nasal passages tested, because these people are just, it's like they're saying the first thing that comes into their head. I'm not a big fan, as you'll gather. And what will happen is that guy said to you, that the guy wrote the letter to try and get everyone together to have that vote. He said 5 days within the takeover going through, but he said we'll have the meeting in 5 days or sooner if possible. Do you know what I mean? It's like sooner if possible to do it. And now they're going for an extraordinary general meeting. Yeah. After they've just smashed Man City in court. Really?
Go on, mate.
Somebody was sending me letters today saying, have you not read the Premier League's announcement? I says, the only thing it's missing is once upon a time they all lived happily ever after. Yeah. Seriously. Honestly, if they took... tell you what.
Honestly, Keith, for me, they've been embarrassed today. They have been absolutely embarrassed because one of them.
They've been embarrassed before. They have, but
they've
got history. They've got track record.
and that's the thing. That's the thing, that they've now got a track record of losing. It wasn't the Newcastle takeover back in 2021. It was Leicester beating them not too long ago. Then on top of that, you still got it. Then on top of that, on the back of that, they've now lost this to Man City, and so they're embarrassed right now. So to kind of answer that Chris's question on the back of that, ultimately they're going to want this wrapped up as soon as possible, because they're not going to want this being dragged through the mud time and time again. They're not going to want it.
Pete, you're spot on. And there's something else you want to ask yourself. This is what I've heard from a reasonable source, is that apparently Man City do damages. Why do you get damages if you lose? Is this a new set of court rules that we don't know about? I think they did. I think they sit there. I think there's 10 thick Geordies just sat there and haven't got a clue about anything. And we all, we all just sitting there waiting to take our tops off in the snow. It's hilarious what they do with them, what they think they get away with. But mark my words, why I'm really happy today, because in about May 2020, I got over the document, and the KC said to me, the only way that document, he said that document wins, and the only way the document could lose if it wasn't tested, if you couldn't prove that document had gone out. So before the takeover come on, I sat away with somebody who I trust, and we went out and we contacted the sender, and we did it publicly and set him a trap, and he fell straight in it. Because we changed something in the letter and said, Eddie, he said, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. That letter's wrong. He says, where's it wrong? Because of that and that. I says, all right. So your letter didn't have that. And all right, must be a typo. But your letter didn't have that. But the letter you did send in, and the KC said to me, game, set and match, you win. Now today it's much easier, because there's a letter that wins a competition case. That is collective lobbying. Collective lobbying is illegal, and it's where 2 or more competitors go against another. Not 11. 11 taking on 1. Now, how did they go against Newcastle? Well, they didn't invite them to the meeting. So that in itself's bad. But then rushing a vote through to stop the anticipated sponsorships coming out of the Middle East. Some might say it borders on racism, but what it certainly does, it's anti-competitive. It's cartel behaviour. So straight away, I'm sitting there thinking, Christ, I've got enough evidence in vaults, in barristers' chambers in London that could win a competition case. But they're just giving you more and more and more. And what they're doing is they're going to write some rules. I'll bet as much as you like that they aren't the fairest rules. They'll be the tightest rules with fairness at the back of the queue to try and keep the advantage for the clubs who have got the PSR advantages. And when they do that, they'll have a competition guy sitting there checking if they comply with competition law. They'll have a team of barristers around producing these rules. And then they might think they've won it. They might think game, set, match, because Man City won a few points. We've written these new rules, and these new rules allow us to, continue on with our cartel. No, not the case. Not the case. You've now got 2 absolute public documents that hang you. And all that's going to happen now is somebody is going to get you in a courtroom. Not an arbitration with a 3-panel judged by the FA. They're going to get you in a courtroom, a British courtroom. European Court of Justice are going to hear this case, and when it does, you will lose. So it's now I sit and smile and I think, well, I'm just looking forward to whoever takes them.
Yeah, well, we've got LB in the house, Man City fan. It's LB. He's great to have you, fella. Thanks for coming and joining us. Of course, you're going to be buzzing today with that news. Look, we've had a Newcastle perspective, and to be fair, if you've not checked out LB's channel, he's talked about from a Newcastle perspective how we should be angry about this. But look, what are your thoughts with this news that's coming out? Are you still buzzing about it? How you seeing it, bro?
Yeah, man. Like, to be honest, it's obviously a lot to digest because it's such a big document, and obviously you've got you're listening to what people are saying. You know what I mean? You're listening to what all the journals are saying. Some of them don't know what they're talking about. If we're being honest, we are like some of them are being embarrassed. It's a madness. But you've just got to go off what you can see and what you can understand. You know what I mean? And what I can see and what I can understand is 2 points. One, that there's a number of rules that the Premier League brought in which are unlawful. That is absolutely shambolic, in my opinion, that the Premier League can have rules in their rule book which is unlawful. Yeah, and that they've also rejected 2 of our sponsorships. Yeah, where unfairly, according to this judgment as well. And that, again, you can't be rejecting people's sponsorships unfairly. That's absolutely shambolic. And then the other part of it is, because that's sort of like one. The other point is that you guys obviously already know this, right? Because you've already seen it. But there was clearly, and it's evidenced, a clear attack on Newcastle Football Club, yeah, and City as well. But it's mainly directed at Newcastle via the emails that we've now seen, which I think you've shown, because I was on another stream. Sorry that I couldn't join earlier. I was on another stream, but I was sort of like watching your stream at the same time. I mean, this email for me, I don't know what you said because I didn't have the audio on. I was just watching what stuff that you was putting on the screen. This for me is absolutely shambolic. Absolutely shambolic. This email is absolutely horrific. I don't know if you guys think I'm going over the top, but that middle paragraph. Yeah. And then this snaky, slimy bit at the bottom saying, "Oh, us CEOs will also volunteer to help you out." I think this absolutely reeks. Yeah, and if I'm being honest, if I've been deadly serious, yeah, I think Newcastle fans, you guys, obviously you clearly are by doing this stream. You guys need to be like banging on about this. I think it should be an independent inquiry about this, mate. The fact that we've got an email, yeah, saying that basically they want to stop Newcastle from doing absolutely anything with related party transactions, and as we're going to help you, CEOs, we're going to help you do it 5 days after you were bought. Nah, mate, I think this is absolutely shambolic behaviour from these 10 clubs, 11 clubs, whatever it is. And you can see clearly why City and Newcastle are massively unhappy with the status quo in this league. And yeah, I just hope that I hope we sue him again. I hope Newcastle do something, man, because they can't have this. I thought that email is absolutely shocking. I don't know if you guys think I'm overdoing it, but I read it. When I read it today on the stream, I was absolutely gobsmacked. I couldn't believe it.
I watched your stream live before I come on here, and I was in the office, and somebody sent us it. It was the Everton supporter sent us actually, and so I put it on, and I listened to it. And if you have a look on my tweet on my Twitter thing, I sent it out and said, get a watch of this. This is another club's fan. Telling you, if any Newcastle fans out there don't think you've been victimised, whatever you call it, have a look what the City fans saying, because you put it over great, and I loved it when you were on there because you were irate about it, and I don't think you're over the top. I think the key part of that whole paragraph that he's just put up is the first paragraph where it says, "I write on behalf of my club and 10 others," because that tells you 11 people. I think the key thing, LB, is that the rights, and they decide to have that meeting, and they don't let one of the parties out the 20 or 10. So this guy comes together as 11 people under competition law. Anti-competitive is where one or more parties try to suppress or stop another party from doing what they do, which is invest and grow their model. But what they're doing is here, they say, look, in the period, because this was only 5 days after the takeover, he's spoken to the other 19 clubs, and he's got 10 of them to come with him. So there's 11 of them gone together, but then they don't invite Newcastle along. So straight away, it's as anti-competitive as you're ever going to make it. I've spent a lot of my working life working. I'm not a lawyer, and never professed to be, but I've spent a lot of life choosing lawyers and choosing barristers to fight big competition cases. And I know what a good one looks like, and I know what a bad one looks like. And when you go in there, you know what arguments are big. You know what a silver bullet is in a competition case. And when you start collective lobbying people, it's an unwinnable thing if you catch anybody doing it. And this is where you've got a record that one or more people are trying to hurt another. And in here, you've got 11 of them. Go to a meeting that Newcastle's not invited to and vote to stop Newcastle. Game, set and match. Well, sell your granny silver because you're going to need it. It's a shithole of an organisation. It's a cartel. And Man City knew when Man City, for their own benefit, listen to them. And the other company, the other team that I think would get out tomorrow is Chelsea. I think Chelsea's, again, flying by the seat of the pants. But if you want to look at the cartel people, there's 3 people, they're all in red, and there's a white club sitting there, don't know where to go. And they're part of it until the going gets too tough. But I'll tell you something, good on them, because everything you say and do and is recorded and is permissible. You cannot get rid of electronic evidence. And all the discussions that took place in bringing that letter from that guy, however that letter came about, where he signed it on behalf of him and 10 clubs, is illegal. And all of these discussions about it were illegal. And the minute they get the WhatsApps, they get the letters, they get the emails, and you can't delete them. You can't delete stuff that goes to multiple people. It's like spores. So and delete one, and you're in big bother. So for me, there's categoric physical evidence that this whole thing where LB says like, you guys should do something. I think that shortly you might see some fans organisations get together for the sake of football in Great Britain, where people just say, can we not just have a fair, open competition again? Can we not just have something that's legitimate, that's fair? Where if Everton get bought over by a big organisation and they're the best team in Europe in 5 years' time, so be it. Who's bothered? Because they've done it, because they've invested and they've bought the right players. And if it's Villa, or if it's West Ham, or if it's Newcastle or City or whoever, fair dues. But if it's based on PSR, which is, I mean, Nick DeMarco is got to be in the top 2 sports law KCs in the country. And he said it's unfair and it's anti-competitive. Now, if KC says that, the council gives that opinion, you can see where all this is heading. This isn't going to last. This doesn't have longevity in it. The Premier League have pulled these stunts for a long, long time, and I think it's time that I think this is going to end up in the interest of the public. And I think this will be run in public. I think it will be a competition action where a judge decides that it's in the interest of all the fans of Great Britain to see what's really going on in the national sport. I think it's catastrophic what could happen with this.
Got a few questions. Go on, Daz. There's some interesting.
Yeah, I want to see what the LB's and Keith's thoughts are on this. Going from David here, he says, dying to see who organised that email because it will come out. What's your thoughts, lads?
I think it's.
I've had 2. I've been told. I've had somebody named from Aston Villa, and I've been told of more people. There's more people saying to Arsenal, but there's somebody named. I've seen 2 or 3 people who usually are on the money in the name of somebody, one of the Villa directors.
Allegedly.
I reckon it'll be that snake at Spurs. Or the
See, I think if someone was running a boot, I think LB would get about 1 to 5 for that, because they're the not and best favourite, aren't they? Yeah,
I would have said Arsenal, Spurs. To be fair,
that's that. But there's been on Twitter tonight. There's been 2 or 3 named somebody, and somebody said it's so and so from Villa. But I don't know. It's I you know what that is. I sort of stopped reading. I was thinking, as long as it's there, and as long as it exists, as long as it went to the 10 other clubs, as long as it made its way to the Premier League. But it'd be fun searching the computers, I tell you.
Right. This one. We'll go to LB first. We're going to go to Keith for this one. So it comes in from Reese. It's a great question here, Reese. He says, so what will Newcastle be doing first thing in the morning?
Is LB answering that or me?
Both. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll tell you what I'd do if I was Newcastle. Yeah, I'd be hiring the best lawyers. Yeah, and I'd just tell them to look at every financial restrictive rule that's in place right now. I'd tell them to go over it with a fine-tooth comb. yeah, and say, if there's any doubt in your mind that these rules might not be lawful, we're challenging it. Because who cares if we lose? Who cares if we challenge them and lose? Who cares? The fact is, we can't just keep letting these people just get away with putting these rules in there. If City would have lost everything today, you think I'd have been sat there going, oh, City were wrong? No, City were right to challenge the Premier League. The Premier League have had it their own way. These clubs have had it their own way for far too long. Yeah. And it's about time that clubs start fighting back to these and say, you know what? Yeah, we don't think these rules are right. And whether we win or not, we're trying to prove a point that we don't think these are right by challenging them. So that's what I'd do. I'd hire some of the best lawyers you can get and tell them to go through every single restrictive thing possible. I'd also be asking them about that bloody email, yeah, and saying, listen, is this not evidence that they are trying to attack our football club? Do you know what I mean? Because as far as I'm aware, there's only 2 clubs owned in the Premier League by a Gulf nation owner, and that's you and us. You know what I mean? And listen, that email was sent 5 days after you guys were bought by the Saudis. So
2 + 2 equals.
It's not by coincidence that's happened. Like they can't even put it to that. It's an absolute load of rubbish. But I think you make a good point. Is because I think we've always spoke about Unloaded about whether Newcastle were going to sort of take Premier League to court when things were happening. They weren't quite right. I think they were very tentative because they didn't want to rock the boat. I think this does not only rock the boat is literally halfway to going over. And I think this point now, if I'm one of the owners, I'm looking to go take it the whole way.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
they are going to need a bigger boat.
Right. I think I've got a cuter answer than that. If it was me, I would say to Reece Bowman, if I was in any way or shape involved in the ownership in Newcastle, what I would do is I would be getting an astute group of fans together to set up a fund of which publicly anybody can donate into. And I would expect to see 2 donations coming from Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia, which would make the collection of those funds out of the question, because to run a competition case, you need petty cash for these 2 clubs. And I would get the clubs to run it. I would get the donations to come in. Kev T's just asked, how much do you need? You'll get a cat case from fans made public for less than £500,000. And when we did it as fans, there was only 2 of us took the financial brunt, and one of them left about a year in. He had to leave to go back to work, so I was left on my own. And the funds that I was committed to was $250,000. So I had to find $250,000 in funds to run the case myself. And I didn't have to spend that in the end because the case never ran, but it was 6 figures. So if I tell you that, if I tell you at the end of it, I was told I would be looked after. I didn't even get a season ticket, but I spent 6 figures. I could have bought 3 boxes. But so when people say to me, "You go and do it again, Keith," I think, no, I'll get the box this time. but when you run a case, if I was a club, I'd get some fans to set up a collection. I would put it out there. I would get other fans to join it, because that's backing and support. And when clubs find out that their fans are contributing towards a case because they want fairness in football, I think the likes of, when you see Fulham and Bournemouth are giving evidence to the Premier League, I think they must be on glue, because they mustn't realise that this is the only chance they've got of competing. If Man City lose this and Man City got relegated, who's going to win? So it's going to be back to the clique at the top of the league. Man City's got to win this case for the fairness of football. But for now, for tomorrow, I would get a collection going amongst fans, and I would make it go national. Then I'd apply to the court to say this has been contributed to by 27 football clubs in Britain, because it's all leagues that want to be a part of this, and it's therefore a matter of public interest. A court would have to then make it public interest. They wouldn't be able not to, in the same way they did with ours last time. 33,000 people tuned in to our case last time. The biggest audience that's ever watched a competition action. When that happens, Man City is sitting with evidence. Newcastle will be sitting with evidence. all these clubs that's been charged will have disclosure evidence, and then we'd look 90 gigabyte evidence from the first case in, and you would have enough evidence to win the case 10 times over. But I can tell you now, publicly, I dare show on screen, you know, in the next week, 2 documents that wins the case, lock, stock and barrel. And one of them you've just seen. One of them is the one that LB's just mentioned. That document of the behaviour they've done. I can't stress enough. If you run a meeting and don't invite the company that you're against, it's like saying, it's like telling me I've got a curly perm. How are you gonna ever say we didn't mean to suppress Newcastle? Well, why do you invite them? Did they get the chance to vote? Did you tell them what you were targeting? It's absolute deliberate anti-competitive cartel behaviour.
I've got a point here. Sorry, I've just seen in the private chat. I'll bring it up. Just lost it now. It was Yano made a really good point. I've got it here. The point that we're missing from discussion with the Premier League rewriting the rules, the rewritten rules need to be lawful. So this will allow us for better investment. So we will benefit from it. It will be an improvement. But are we overlooking this fact? Like, LB, I'll come to you.
Not really, because I get Yano's point. We will get a better set of rules because we'll get a set of rules that comply with the bare bones of the law. That's what you're going to get, Yano. But go back to my second point, which I said, we've got the evidence now. We know that they were acting illegally 4 years ago, and they're still acting illegally now. So to me, whatever rules they write, I think you should look as a temporary stopgap. You know, the rules maybe is where they curtail all of these investments, these interest-free loans. Maybe that helps us. Maybe some of our sponsorships go through. But to me, get the case into court, smash it wide apart, and then make it a league where clubs can invest in their own model. So Man City come along and say, we want to invest, and they might do rules, say for every 100 million you invest, you've got to put 100 million in a fund in case you go bankrupt. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So they might make you guarantee your investment. But Man City, Villa, sounds like Everton, West Ham, Newcastle, they're all going to have a go. And no doubt the Man Uniteds of the world will all have a go. But the difference is they'll be having to go alongside the people in the same level of swimming pool, same depth, everything.
LB's been saying that for the long. How many times have you been saying that?
Bro, I've been saying this for years, man. I'm saying if you want to, the first thing that the Premier League needs to do, right, is decide what are these rules here for? Are they here to stop clubs going bust? Yeah. Or are we actually just trying to stop teams from challenging at the top?
Exactly.
And if you want to stop teams from challenging at the top, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. But just tell us that's what the aim is. Just say we don't want clubs, and then design a set of rules. I think I've said this for years. Every club should have to put 1 year's worth of operating expenses in an account. You've got to give them a decade to do it because teams like City, Arsenal, Newcastle, whoever's got the big win, they're not going to be able to just find 400 million and just put it in an account. You've got to give them time to do it. But then if a club wants to spend 40, 50 million pound a year on wages for Mbappe, no problemo. But that's got to be in an account. So if one day your owner turns up and says, I've had enough, I'm not putting any money in, you can fund the club for a year whilst you can find a new owner. Yeah, that's how I think it should just be. I also don't think you should be able to spend £1 billion a transfer window. The problem is, then people say, well, what should you be able to spend? And I don't know the answer to that. That's a tricky question, right? Sometimes you got to accept that what we're dealing with here, it's not always easy to come up with a proper solution. The only thing I do know is the current thing that we have in, the current rules that we have in, are just a joke. They're just a joke because the rules for City are mint. They're mint. They keep us at the top. It means teams like Newcastle can't spend money. Yeah, so great for us because if you did spend money, you'd be challenging us for a league within 18 months. Keeps us at the top. Meanwhile, you've got teams like Liverpool who don't want to spend any money. Yeah, Arsenal are not really that serious, but a bit more serious than Liverpool. United who just spend money like it's confetti, but they don't know how to spend it. And the same with Chelsea, man. So this is the thing with these rules, you know what I mean? Like, these rules are great for City keeping us at the top, but Carl Doon in his end of season interview said these rules are really not good for the Premier League. They're really not. It removes the competitiveness because teams can't spend.
Yeah, it's marvelous. It's marvelous hearing a Man City fan say that because, like all credit, yeah, it's 6 o'clock tonight. I didn't even know who you were. I never seen you. And an Everton fan said, "Is this?" The Everton fan says, "Have a look at this." I put this podcast thing on, and I see this bloke come on. and he was jumping around like I thought, who's this? And when he thinks he's Man City, he said, lads, Newcastle, you want to get? And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, Christ, I've given.
You know what it is, Keith? You know what it is, yeah? Because like I don't want to come up and just like down a moral high ground because I'm really not, yeah. But the fact is, right, we've had to fight this for over a decade. Yeah, and I when I started supporting City, mate, yeah, we were shit, right? So, like, for me to see my club go through this, it's been such an amazing journey. And, like, I want other fans to go through that journey as well. Like, legitimately, I do. Obviously, I want to win the league every year. I'm not saying, oh, you win the league this year, lads. No, I fucking want to win the league. And I wanted to beat you guys last weekend, yeah? And when we drew that game, I was gutted. You know what I mean? And I was calling you guys out or whatever. That's football, right? But I genuinely do. I don't just want the same teams to be at the top. I want other teams to go through the journey. But at the moment, that's stopping it. And this is where it gets me a little bit. This is where it gets me a little bit like frustrated. Yeah, is we got these fans of like smaller clubs in like lower league opposition, and because they don't look at the rules and they just go off what the mainstream media says, they think the rules are great. And then you speak to them about it and say, why do you think the rules are great? It stops you from doing this. He says, you do realise if you ever got bought by a rich owner, you'd be screwed. You wouldn't be able to spend any money. You wouldn't be able to go through these amazing journey that I've been through of going from this just mid-level team to Champions League winning team, winning the treble. You know, you wouldn't be able to do that with these set of rules. And it's like, you know what I mean? People need to wake up, man. And people are waking up. It took them a decade, yeah, but people are waking up now to realise that these rules are a load of nonsense.
A week on Friday, I was in a pub and Newcastle supporter said to me, she said, I hope City lose that case. I looked at him. What? And he says, I hope they get the boot thrown of what they've done. And I says, well, when you do that, I says, make sure you put the light off at Newcastle. I says, why is that? I says, well, you might be the last one out. And they don't realise that you know, if you lose, the cartel win, and then red teams just get stronger and stronger. You disappear. Yeah. Let's suppose you got relegated. Newcastle's not getting anywhere close. And neither is the Villas and the other people. There'll be a gap at the top. There'll be a bridge that we never, ever make up. Because if they win that case, and if they can hide all the illegalities, which Man City started exposing now, they win everything. And they stay there at the top. I'll tell you, mark no words about that. I mean, in my lifetime, I won't see us win anything. I'll tell you that, buddy. So for me, I looked tonight and I listened to you, what you said. You were saying, Newcastle, you need to fight back against this. We've never met, but I've got scars as deep as you'll ever get for trying to fight and even being told that my case was going to run in court, and that would have been everything. It would have been everything just to run that case in court. When you've got something, imagine if you've got a horse and it can't be beat, and you know that, and it goes to the racetrack and you've got and it goes in and it gets lame before it goes out. Your world just disappears. And I had a court case that would expose something that's been going on for 10 years. It's exactly the stuff LB's talking about now. When you see you fought through it to get back, you know that from 2013, 14, 15, 16, that all the Man City growth was being stopped. It was the Chelsea and the Man City thing. We've got to stop this. Stop what Chelsea did, stop what Man City did. And then Newcastle broke it all apart. The day our takeover went through, everybody, Spurs had sat at the table with PIF before us and got turned down for it. Liverpool flirted with getting taken over by PIF. When we got it, they were determined to stop it. And that's the same now, is they've just shown that despite Man City's wealth, and despite the way they coached, I mean, I look at the manager and I look at the football you play, and it's what everybody wants to play. It's big of you to sit there tonight and say, I want other people to experience it, because there's an awful lot of fans who would say, bollocks to you, Lord, I just want this forever. But the fact that you want other people to share it is competitive talk, and I believe you when you say it, and hats off to you. I've never met you before tonight, but I'll certainly follow you and keep in touch, because you talk more sense than many a football fan I've listened to for a long, long time.
Definitely. We've
Football friends. You love it.
But the funny thing, talk about friends, right? We've not had a friend in this league, yeah, for the last 10 years. And now there's 4 of us, right? So, like, I'll tell you what as well. There'll be other clubs in this league that don't know where to go. Yeah. Because what they'll be thinking of, right? If you got some clubs in this league, right, who are looking at it, and this is where sort of like Everton went wrong, and even Newcastle under Ashley, is that they voted for all these rules that stopped City. But obviously what that does is then when you come to sell the club, it's not as attractive to the owner who's now going to want to buy it, because they're going to look at it and say, I'll buy it, yeah, but when I buy it, there's not as much as I can do with it because you voted through these rules. There'll be more and more clubs who will start joining City, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Everton. And I'm telling you, man, like the league's completely torn apart. You know, you've got these 10 clubs, and I reckon some of these now will probably be looking at this and going, are we really on the right side here? Are we really on the right side? So start doubting it.
People like Forest, you see, Forest are trying to compete. They're spending money. They've improved their squad. Look at how well they've been doing this season. Their owner must be looking at this and thinking, if this comes around next time, am I on the right side of the table? Because I don't think they are. I look at Bournemouth. Bournemouth have invested. They've done it smartly. They've not invested heavy amounts, but they must be looking at this and thinking, we have a good season this season. Money we get in, we can reinvest it in and maybe push up a little bit more. They've got to be asking the question. There are other owners there that are now should be asking the question, because they've been duped for years into thinking that they were doing the right thing. It's almost like the Man United's, Arsenal, Liverpool's, and Tottenham's have just been rubbing their back, tickling their back, telling them how great they are just to get their vote. And they've just been playing along with it. I will give you an extra 5 million for a player here or there, and we'll look after you. Now, they've got to think for themselves. Everton have started to do it. We've done it. And we understand where City have been because we're now in their situation. Everton looking at it with new ownership and thinking, we want to invest. And Chelsea, they want to invest as well, and they want to be able to be in that point. But you look at where Man City have been, League One all the way back up to the Premier League. We look at us being in the Championship. Villa have been in the Championship. Brighton, we understand what it's been like to be down there. So we understand even more and we appreciate it more now we're up there challenging near the top. But if you go back 20, 30 years, you look at the amount of teams that have been there and dropped off in and out, whether it's like a Leeds that's been up there, or whether it's like an Aston Villa in the early 90s, or whether it's been, another team. Forest were up there for a period of time. We were up there in the 90s. Then it was Chelsea. Then, Villa dabbled a little bit. Then it was Tottenham. There's been ups and downs of other teams that have had moments. Leicester, when they won the league. That's what the Premier League's always been about. It's been about being competitive and allowing teams from nowhere to come up and actually compete. But what these rules are doing, they're putting a stop to it. These teams do not want anybody else being up there and challenging. They want to keep them down there. They want to stay at the top, and they want it to be the same 4 or 5 clubs up there fighting every year.
And they act like it's wrong as well. They act like it's wrong. They say, look, you shouldn't be able to come from League One up to the Premier, or you shouldn't be able to go from 15th to the... Why not? Who gives you a God-given right to be at the top of the table? Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, football's always been about money. As long as I've been alive, I don't know what it was like in the 70s and the 60s, man, but I'm sure transfers were still a large part of the game.
Do you want to tell you?
I didn't want to say anything, Keith. Me and you are mates now.
You talk about clubs, or you look at 2 clubs out of that. Like you've got one of the points you put in about put the fund aside. You look at Leicester. Look at the tragedy that happened there, where they had one of the best owners in the Premier League, and that guy would have just kept on investing in his club. He was a fanatic of Leicester City, and unfortunately met his death at the ground. So putting that money aside when you invest, it takes care of tragedies like that. So somebody could one day invest, and the next year there could be tragedy, and that club could be financially insecure. So putting money aside when you invest makes common sense. And I think that's the kind of rules that should come. But I've got evidence when we were trying to get the takeover part of our 90 gigabyte, and some of the evidence we collected was where when Leicester won the league, some of the cartel players were recorded as saying they met and had a discussion to make sure Leicester City never happens again. Well, you're not going to get anything more anti-competitive than that. Why shouldn't Leicester City win the league? But there was owners of some football clubs that were still prominent in the PSR stigmatism, who were trying to stop a Leicester ever happening again. And Leicester were told themselves that they would never win it again by some of the big owners, which is just criminal. I mean, who were there to say that? But then the club that really drives home anti-competitive to me is Notts Forest, because when Notts Forest were charged, they were like fourth of bottom. So they were penalised for investing in players to try and keep them up. And if they didn't invest and didn't get charged, they'd have gone down. So they had a choice. Go down gracefully, keep your mouth shut, or invest and we'll fine you. And it's not anti-competitive. So you invest and get charged for finishing fourth or bottom. What a load of horse shit. I've never known a sport and competition with money attached as corrupt as this.
Keith, there was rumours not long ago that some championship clubs were kind of nervous or, worried about getting promoted, because they knew that if they were to get promoted, obviously expectations raise, and then they know they've got this noose around the neck where they're like, oh yeah, you can't spend too much, and they haven't got the financial outlay to be able to go, to be able to spend. I mean, look at the Forest owner. He spent all that money, didn't he? And then he wanted, as you say, to do it again and come back and have another go. And he didn't. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, boys, I think it was Fulham. Fulham came up, didn't they? And they basically hardly spent anything and then went straight back down. But they were worried about, being able to keep within the financial fair play rules at the time. So it was like, so if you end up getting promoted, obviously all your fan base are buzzing, you're all excited, looking forward to the new season. And then on the other hand, you're looking at it and going, oh, can't overspend though. Because if we overspend, we're going to get points deductors and, come into all this financial difficulty. And we've seen how many clubs have come up, gone down, and then never gone back up again. So clubs are now worried.
We were given some information where some clubs, and everybody has a strategy, all these people, the businesses at the end of the day, and some had a strategy to get promoted and to come back down with the parachute payments and to live off the parachute payments, to take the payments. And I wouldn't do it, but there's a club who you can all guess, where somebody I know was present when some of the owners were present, and they were talking about if they sold a certain player, how much they would take out of the club, and if they got the parachute payments, how much they would take out, because the parachute payments are massive to a championship club. If you go back down with a championship, with a parachute payment invested in players, Christ, there's nobody going to live with you. I can remember when Dwight Gale, we got up and Dwight Gale was surplus to what we wanted, and he could finish, and he was a championship striker, and he could get you, typically, he'd probably get you 30 goals in that league. And if Callum Wilson had gone into that league, imagine what Callum Wilson's worth to the championship side now. Like, he's going to score you goals on pace. So what I'm saying is those kind of strikers more or less put somebody into the playoffs just by having someone that can finish. You've got a half-decent side. But there's some clubs, which is confirm what Chris is saying, they want to come up and they know they can't live and can't invest the next stage to stay up. So they get the parachute payments, go down a couple of more years, and then maybe get back up again. Look at last year. Who came up when it went down? Do you remember?
Luton.
Yeah.
Burnley.
Yeah.
I can't remember who the other one. Sheffield United.
Who went down?
Yeah, Sheffield United.
All
three, yeah.
All three come went down. It's like a yo-yo. But what I'm saying is, it comes back to what obviously, this should be open to everybody. This league would be better if there wasn't Leicester City every 5 years that come up and come from nowhere and won it. But it's great when you hear Man City guy, best team in the world for me, sitting there saying, I want people to compete. And some of the people in their club saying the same. So, if Man City go out of it, if anything happens, which God forbid it doesn't, I dread to think, I would say I'd go as far as to say, would you go and watch football? Because the competition stinks.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think we can win this. More so today, because what's happened today, the evidence is repeated 3.5 years ago's evidence. Big news. Put all the interest-free loans into that. And the rumour, I'm getting told, somebody just sent us a message there, like a decent message from a good source, is that when they voted about the interest-free loans, apparently that was at the same meeting that they voted on the associated parties. So I don't know whether that's true or not, but someone just fired that over and said that that's when I don't know whether that's why Newcastle got no interest-free loans, but that's what someone just said. I don't know whether I had time to check it out.
Interesting. Phil, got one question before we wrap?
Yeah, let's kind of close out with comments and questions, just one or two. Just from Geordie Dan says, great discussion, guys. So happy we've finally been proven right from about the discrimination against Newcastle and the corrupt red cartel. But yeah, Super City says as well, I thought Keith was Ray Parlour with his curly perm there for a while. So nice one. Great to have all the City fans in, and thanks for LB for sending them our direction as well. But, a question for both Keith and LB. We'll go to you first, LB, for what you'd like here, and then Keith will go to you. And it comes to Tom Dixon, but we'll twist it a bit. For you, LB, who would Man City like to sign in January? Thinking about Rodri. If you say Bruno, you ruin that friendship.
Bruno G. No, we can't be all nicey. Come on, man. It's meant to be some football rivalry here. You know, no, I don't know who we're going to sign. We do need someone. We need to bring someone in the midfield because we've not got enough players in that midfield now, especially with all the games. So I don't know where it's going to be. We've been linked with Zubimendi tonight, who Liverpool wanted in the summer. We've been linked with a guy called Samuel Ritchie, who Pete knows about in Torino. Looks like a decent player, but very young. So I don't know really. I don't know. There's no obvious players. We just need a number. We need someone in. We need another body.
Another body. And Keith, for you, who do you want Newcastle to bring in January?
I'm going to fight some pelters here because I would tell you someone. I wouldn't go after Gay, mate. I wouldn't go back for him after the season he's had and what happened in the window. He could have given England that he wanted to come here, but he just played two parts of the middle and he couldn't lose. And if he'd come for 70 million, but we spent more time in the last window trying to buy a centre half, and all the way through, I was thinking to myself, we need another centre forward. And so if you said who would buy in January, I'd put the cat right among the pigeons. I'd go and buy Osserman, and I'd stick him in with Isaac, and I'd just smash every defence in the Premier League. But we need a right winger. We need a right winger. We need a defensive midfield player. We need a right-sided centre half. But it's shown this year that we actually have done better at centre half than what we've done up front, because we knew that we had the risk of injuries at centre forward. And when we went out and we spent more money on a third centre forward than what we could have bought Delap off them people for. We could have bought Delap for the same money, who was getting goals for Ipswich every week. And looks, he was talked about it being a pedigree. People said it. It's like if Man City's that good, they can afford to let people like Palmer go. You've got to say, well, is Delap another one? You don't know. That's the power of having a brilliant squad. When you've got them people, you have to let people go. You can't just keep people forever. So for me, I'd have filled my boots and bought another striker or a right-sided player that could come in off the right and play up front. That's what I'd have took as priority. And then I'd have got the centre half and that. And don't get us on about who we should buy, because I'll probably name about 10 players.
No, interesting. I think we're probably going to be the two teams that are going to actually find somebody. We've got money burning up, holding our pocket, and as LB said, City need to go and get a replacement for Rodri for being out. So we're definitely going to be here for it. But look, we'll wrap there, guys. Thank you for everyone in the chat. About well over 900 plus in the chat. So make sure you hit that like on the way out. And if you're new to the channel, if you're a member of LB's channel, it's LB, go and subscribe to that. And of course, if you're new to us, come and subscribe to us as well. Keith, big thanks to you for coming on. I know it was short notice, but really appreciate your time. Big thanks to Kieran Maguire as well. Rice of Football. Check that out with Nick DeMarco. That's upcoming very, very soon. And it's LB. I imagine you got some APT streams coming.
Yeah, I'm going to be a lawyer soon, me. Who needs to pass the bar?
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure meeting you, LB, and all. I'll follow you, and we'll keep in touch. But thanks to all. Thanks everyone. Thanks for the kind words from people who's tuned in. It's always a great show. I love coming on. Thanks to you three lads, because I've never
Awesome,
come on had a bad reception. Thanks very much. Much appreciated.
Nice one. Well, we'll end with this, and LP, you might have seen this before. Good night, everyone.